Thank you. It is truly a great honor to stand with my colleague from Kansas as we are on the cusp of actually passing legislation that has very real consequences for a lot of our American citizens, especially our Native American citizens. And I will tell you, as someone who represents Indian country in my state, this is the #1 priority. The #1 priority for our tribes. And it's interesting because a lot of people would look at this and say, why this issue? And I think it goes to the heart of Native American sovereignty. What has been happening as it relates to 1099s and the potential of taxing services provided by tribal governments basically begs the question, do we really understand or do we really appreciate that these are sovereign governments? The same way the states are sovereign, the same way the counties and cities would be sovereign. And I think in many ways it has very real economic consequences, but a great value in this legislation is in the symbolic consequences of having this body recognize the importance of recognizing these treaty rights, recognizing the value of treaties and trust responsibilities. Now, as a former Attorney General and as a lawyer, I view treaty rights and trust responsibilities like a contract with the United States and our Native American tribes. As a United States citizen, I view these treaties as sacred obligations. We have not done a good enough job living up to our commitments to tribal nations, and as a consequence, tribal governments have been forced to supplement services that the federal government promised to provide. And yet, for years, the IRS has audited Indian tribes for providing health care, education, or housing assistance for those in need. Here are just some of the stories that I've heard from Native Americans in North Dakota and across the country. I've heard about the IRS wanting the tribes to issue 1099s, basically saying you got something of taxable value, to tribal elders who received blankets as honoraria for performing traditional ceremonies. I've heard about the IRS questioning a tribal government's provision providing backpacks and school supplies to elementary school children as a taxable benefit to the families of the children. I've heard about the IRS imposing a tax on the value of a handicap ramp, a value $2,000, erected by the tribal government to help a tribal elder access her home. And the stories go on. The status quo isn't fair and it isn't right. And this practice certainly does not fully respect that tribes are government. That's why I joined with Senator Moran to introduce this bipartisan Tribal General Welfare Exclusion Act last year. The bill would fully recognize that Indian tribes, as sovereign nations, are responsible for making certain government programs and services best fit the needs of their citizens. Just as state and local governments are determined to decide what is in the best interest of their citizens, like scholarships, elder or child care, or housing assistance, we have to recognize that tribal governments have the right to make those decisions without tax consequences. With this bill, we're supporting tribal self-determination and taking a step towards living up to our trust and treaty obligations. Indian tribes and their members should not be subject to heightened IRS scrutiny. And I think Senator Moran has outlined that issue so well, because some people may see that what we're doing here is carving out an exception, creating an extra benefit for tribal members that's not enjoyed by the entire citizenry of this country. Nothing could be further than the truth. Nothing could be further than the truth. In fact, we are leveling the playing field. The Tribal General Welfare Exclusion Act will bring parity in the tax treatment of Indian governments. It'll recognize the unique relationship with tribal governments that they have with their citizens and allow them the opportunity to craft programs which best fit their community need. I want to just take a moment and suggest to all of you that if you've spent time in Indian country, and if you've looked at the benefits that tribal governments provide, and you think about the resources of the IRS and where you might go to actually collect dollars that would enhance revenue, the last place you should look in this country is in Indian country. The last place you should look in this country is in Indian country. I'd like to address a few other really important reasons why this bill is so critical. The IRS recently issued helpful guidance, and we're very appreciative of that work. With that being said, we also must make sure that parity provided by that guidance is in statutory language. That way, we've weighed in, there is certainty, no one can do a look back, and no one can change it without that change coming to this body and coming to the House of Representatives and being enacted in law. In addition, the Tribal General Welfare Exclusion Act includes two items that are critical to the advancement of a better relationship between tribal government and the federal government. First is a training requirement. We must make sure that IRS field agents are well-versed in federal Indian law and the unique treaty and trust relationship the federal government has with their tribes. Second, as the training is taking place, our bill also suspends all audits and examination of tribal governments for 1 year to allow this education to take place. It isn't rare for Congress to pass legislation that supports guidance issued by the federal agencies to give more weight to the issues and make sure there is no potential misinterpretation. That is what we are doing this week, with the help of a lot of our colleagues who believe in this legislation as well. We want to supplement the IRS guidance to expand rather than restrict the safe harbor provisions. When I joined the United States Senate, I promised to be a partner, to honor and respect the sovereign rights of Native Americans, just as I always have. This bill is a step in the right direction. Now, I fully anticipate that as we move forward this week, we will in fact enact this legislation. I fully anticipate that we will send the right message to tribal governments that we see you the way you are. You are a sovereign government entitled to make the decisions that you need to make to the benefits of your citizens without undue and irrational interference from the IRS. And I think that the bipartisan nature of this bill is a tribute to my friend from Kansas who understands completely what we're attempting to do. It is one of those rare moments that I've had since I've been in the United States Senate where you see a good bill being debated, a good bill being discussed, and then have an opportunity to actually do the right thing. And so I thank my friend from Kansas for the opportunity to join with him as a co-sponsor of this legislation. It is critically important that this message gets sent and that we have an opportunity into the future to continue to work with tribal governments to act in the best interest of tribal citizens and provide the services that are essential for a growing population of Native American citizens, but also a population that lives in a great deal of poverty. And so I thank my friend from Kansas. I look forward to seeing this bill signed into law, which I think will happen. I think that the stars are aligning, and it will be a great day and a very important step in securing a better relationship of all governments with Native American people. With that, I yield the floor and note the absence of a quorum.